Hi everyone, it's John. Welcome back to my channel. It is December 29th, 2021, and welcome to the last book review that I'm going to post for this year. On Friday, I am going to post something like a wrap-up for the year, just sort of show you the books that I've read, and maybe give you the star rating that I gave them on Goodreads, but no extensive commentary or anything like that. I know some people don't like to sit through 8 or 10 or 12 minute reviews of books that you don't really find interesting, so I figured a way around that for some people might just be a very quick 10 or 12 minute video showing you everything that I read with no commentary instead. So you can get maybe some reading ideas without having to sit through the extensive sort of ramblings of whatever I have to say about every single thing I read. So the last book I want to bring to you this year is really a great book. It is put out by the Library of America, but it's not one of those really well-known black cover versions. This is one of the LOA paperbacks that are white with the red, white, and blue around them, and this is The Souls of Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois. For those who might not know, Du Bois, he's really a fascinating figure. Lived an incredibly long, very productive life, and was a brilliant man. Perhaps, if you know 2 or 3 things about him, this book might be one of them. But because he did live such a long, illustrious, influential life, was really a groundbreaker in just so many different ways. I want to talk a little bit about his life first, and then ease my way into a discussion of the book. Most people unfamiliar with Du Bois might know him only as an early advocate for humanistic education, as being a civil rights activist, and as an author. And he was certainly all of those things. What fewer people know about Du Bois is the astonishing depth and breadth of his intellectual achievement. After completing 2 undergraduate degrees and a master's degree at Harvard University, he went to Germany to study at the University of Berlin for 2 years. And sometime in the middle of the 3rd year of his PhD program, which is why he was going to the University of Berlin, or the German equivalent thereof, whatever they call a PhD in German universities back then, his academic stipend was pulled out from underneath his feet, and he was forced to come back to the United States. And as a consequence, he had to, instead of getting his PhD from the university in Berlin, he had to settle for becoming the first African American ever to earn a doctorate from Harvard University, where he studied with the illustrious likes of William James, Josiah Royce, and George Santayana. While his doctorate was in history, he would go on to do a lot of groundbreaking work in the areas of economics, philosophy, and the newly burgeoning field of sociology as well. His first academic position was at Wilberforce University, where he was a professor of classics, actually, not history at all, and he was in charge not just of classical languages, like Greek and Latin, but also German, English, and the teaching of history. Imagine how many people these days could teach both Greek and Latin at a college level, but also German and English. maybe a few academics, but that's a pretty high bar. Um, After his 2 years at Wilberforce, he and his wife moved to Philadelphia, where he was offered an opportunity to do some really interesting, serious sociological work on Philadelphia's impoverished black neighborhoods. And the work that he did, uh, the book that came out of that field work was called The Philadelphia Negro. It was published in 1899. It was really one of the first pieces of serious academic sociology that took as its subjects African Americans. Of course, these are just some of the highlights of Du Bois's life that take us up to the 1903 publication of The Souls of Black Folk. 1903 being the year that Du Bois turned 45 years old. Excuse me, 35. He's born in 1868. Blonde woman. 35. So the book is a loosely interconnected series of essays which present personal and historical reflections on what we would broadly call today, I think, the black experience in the United States in the years following the Civil War. Again, it's important to remember this is published in 1903, so this is a time in which the Civil War was still very much within living memory for many of its would-be readers. In the essays, Du Bois introduces and applies two ideas he is today most remembered for using. One of them is the concept of the veil, and the other is the idea of double consciousness. The veil is maybe Du Bois's most enduring and valuable legacy when it comes to the sociological analysis of the black experience in the United States at this time. He says that all black people must see themselves through a veil. Being fully aware of oneself and state of mind, but also looking at yourself through the eyes of another, and often measuring your own sense of worth, accomplishment, attractiveness, etc. through the eyes of the other. So you have this own sort of sense of your own values, abilities, self-worth. But since you live in a society that is at every level institutionally racist, you're always thinking about what white people around you think. So you're always putting yourself in their shoes to look back at you. So you're living in your own skin and simultaneously living in the skin of the people who you know are judging you because of simply the color of your own skin. So it's a very sort of mirror-like thing that he's describing here. Black people are forced to see through the veil in order to survive. They have to understand that white people are looking at them in certain ways. And if they can't understand that, they can't go out into society and see and understand and appreciate how society works. Whites, on the other hand, are either usually unable to sense the presence of the veil, or they refuse to realize its presence. The contents of the essay might seem a little disparate, but they quickly, as you read on, quickly coalesce around a topic, around a series of concerns, as well as literary registers, I should say. There is, for example, the sentimentally really bittersweet piece, The Meaning of Progress, which tells the days in which Du Bois used to teach in a tiny, poor schoolhouse. There's the essay of Mr. Booker T. Washington and Others, which really finely distills down the essential points of the famous debate that Du Bois had with how black people should go about bettering themselves, quote unquote. Booker T. Washington, of course, advocated for this idea of industrial education, roughly what we might think of as vocational training today, whereas Du Bois argued for the importance of philosophy in a classical humanistic education. The 12th essay of the 12 is is a really fascinating tribute to someone whose name has been almost completely forgotten. He was a black intellectual and minister by the name of Alexander Crummell. And the last essay, I think I said 12 of 12. The Crummell was 12 of 12. There's one more. It's called The Sorrow Songs. And it is basically an analysis of the Negro spiritual in all of its forms and sort of deployments and kinds, and which is really interesting because this ends up being not just the last chapter of a book that he happens to write, but is also a really sophisticated reimagination of the Negro spiritual that claims it is not the music of joyful black lives, but rather is the music of deep, long suffering and inwardness that refuses to give white people just to hand over to white society ideas of respectability and aesthetic beauty and the self-worth of black people, but instead to fight for those things through music. As for its literary worth, I guess I can do little more than to point out that the top of the essay, again, this is a man of no small amount of formal education. And I guess if you want to, it could have been dry, it could have been bone dry. But really the shocking thing I learned when I read it was how stunningly beautiful the essays are. I guess I was kind of expecting some top-notch social criticism, a little bit of inward reflection, but what I wasn't really expecting at all was just the intensely beautiful, lyrical, poetic beauty of the prose. In closing, and hopefully as an inducement to push at least a few people who watch this video to go actually read the book itself, let me end with an excerpt that really adeptly brings together the theme of double consciousness as well as Du Bois's inimitable style that I'm referring to. And this is a quote from the text. Quote, "After the Egyptian and Indian, the Greek and Roman, the Teuton and Mongolian, the Negro is a sort of seventh son, born with a veil and gifted with second sight in this American world. A world which yields him no true self-consciousness, but only lets him see through the revelation of the other world. It is a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness, this sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of a world that looks on in amused contempt and pity. One ever feels his two-ness, an American, a Negro, two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings, two warring ideals in one dark body whose dogged strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder." People just don't write like that anymore. What more can I say? Beautiful, beautiful stuff. And needless to say, a world-class intellectual and just a mountain to think about out of, in size only, a molehill of a book. Please do yourself a favor if you have not already and go get your hands on a copy of The Souls of Black Folk by the great W.E.B. Du Bois. And I will be back next week with another review.